You may be wondering, and a lot of people seem to ask, what my settings are. So today let's talk about the settings I use to shoot videos like this and other videos too. Let's do it. So to make it easier so you can see, instead of me trying to have to do it all backwards this way, let me flip to a settings shot and take it away, Chris.
So basically what I'm going to do is go through my camera and show you how I kind of have it set up for video. Because I do video most of the time, I use the video dial and set my settings for the custom 1 and 2 around the video. What I mean by that is if you turn to video, all my settings now for custom 1 and 2 are based off of this video. So I use 2 custom settings, I use 1 and I use 2. If you look at the settings on here, everything is exactly the same apart from one thing. That is the video quality and the frame rate. So for 1, I use 120 frames a second, 1080p video. For 2, I use 24p, so 24 frames a second, 4K video. That way if I want to shoot B-roll, I go to 1. If I want to shoot a talking head video or something where I maybe want to crop in later on, or I just want higher quality video, that's going to be what I use 2 for. So all my settings for custom 1 and custom 2 are exactly the same other than the frame rates and the video quality. So let's jump straight into the menus. Okay, so in menu 1, a lot of this is going to be related to photography. I might skip over some of this stuff because it's not relevant to video. I might touch on some of it very quickly, but for the most part it's video. The settings here aren't going to be what I use to shoot photos anyway. I do it in manual. So I'm going to skip over this. Aspect ratio, leave as 3.2 in photos. If you did want to shoot in 16:9, you could. You're not actually using the full frame. So shoot in 3:2 because you can always crop to 16:9 afterwards if you wanted to. You can leave that like that for now. Long exposure NR on, high ISO NR normal, color space is always sRGB. This is where you would control your custom functions and your custom settings. I'll show you how to do that later on. Leave that set to like that. Here's a big one for you, continuous autofocus. So if you're shooting a video like I shoot YouTube videos, and you want to be able to have the camera automatically focus, you always want it on continuous autofocus. There's other modes you can pick, but for the most part, continuous autofocus. Part of the reason that people love these cameras is the continuous autofocus. That one there, leave that like that. Leave all these other ones like this. Focus area, personal preference. Some people prefer different settings. For the most part, for most of the videos I shoot, I use wide. You have other settings you can use as well, like zone, center, flexible spots that you can control. Obviously you have the touch focus as well. For the most part, I just use wide. Focus settings, don't need to change that. Leave that like that. These are settings related to photography. Gonna skip over it. Again, gonna skip over it. Skipping this. Okay, just wanted to quickly touch on that. I'm skipping a lot of steps, a lot of menus there. Those are things that I don't often use, and a lot of it's related to photography. As I said before, if I'm going to shoot photography or I'm going to shoot some photos, I always say I'm going to shoot photography. That sounds so weird. When I take photos, I'm going to put it in manual mode. I'm not going to use this menu system because currently we're in video. So yeah, I'm skipping over menus and things that you don't necessarily need to change. I could have made this video like an hour long and talk about every possible setting, how it affects your image, that kind of thing. Didn't want to do that. So yeah, that's why I'm skipping so much. So doing it on purpose. All right, back to the video. Exposure compensation is 0. ISO, obviously you're going to control that depending on what you need to use, depending on your environment. Metering mode, this is personal preference. It depends on the lighting situations that you're in. For the most part, I use multi and I adapt around that. Spot metering mode, this is basically the camera is getting its information on the light, the exposure, from whatever you have your setting to right here. I use center. Leave the rest of those the same like that. Flash, obviously not related to video, so skip that. White balance is going to be automatic for most of my videos that I do for YouTube, automatic. If I'm doing something with pro work and I want to make sure everything stays the same between 2 cameras, always set your white balance to something specific. You can change the color temperature, or you could leave it on daylight or shade, but for the most part for YouTube videos, automatic. Sometimes there's problems with it, but it's easy just to leave it automatic. The rest of these I leave like this. Here's my creative style, autumn leaves. Picture effect off, picture profile off. So people that set things like S-Log, it's all going to be in here. Gives you all your information about S-Log and everything from in here. So, for example, I think The Cine 2, that's a popular one. S-Log 2, there you go. That's a really popular one. That's Picture Profile 7. I don't use those. I use off. And then I just change my creative style, which is the Autumn Leaves one right there. Focus magnifier, I did a video about that before. Click up here if you want to see about that. Autofocus in focus magnifier on. Manual focus assist, so if you're shooting a photo or video as well, you can focus by clicking the button here, and then if you control the focus ring, if you have a manual focus ring, it'll actually zoom to show you your kind of what's in focus, what's not in focus for a split second, and then it'll jump back to your regular shot. Leave that exactly like that. And then we're into movie mode. Alright, so for the purpose of this one, I'll show you in the 4K mode. As I said, I use a custom 1 and 2 dial. Right now I'm in dial 2. If I change this to that would basically be what I have on my dial 1. That's it. All other settings are exactly the same. Okay, so S&Q settings. I don't use S&Q. S&Q is slow and quick. What this means is if you record in this setting, it will allow you to view back on the screen in slow motion or in quick. Quick could be like a time lapse or something like that if you want to shoot it like 1 frame a second. I don't use this because it doesn't record sound. I prefer to pick my own frame rate and basically slow it down in post. Proxy recording, I leave off. If you say wanted to be able to record a video and quickly send it to your phone to edit, doing it in 4K isn't going to be ideal. So proxy recording will record a smaller version that you can then edit on your phone quickly and easily. AF drive speed I leave to normal. AF track sensitivity I leave to standard. Basically this means I'm just using standard autofocus speed. If you are filming sports or something like that, you might want to change these up to fast or responsive. In my case, this works for me for 95% of the videos I shoot. Everything else there is standard. Audio recording obviously on. Want to be able to record my sound. Audio recording level. This is a big important thing. When you get the camera, it's kind of maxed out at about 31. Sometimes that can be too loud. I'm quite far from this camera here. I'm not recording audio directly into this camera. I'm recording it to this one here, which is my A6300. So the levels aren't directly what I would normally have, but I turn it down here to about 15. I can always go up louder if I wanted to. Audio level display, I leave that on. Basically that means if you're filming, you can see your audio levels as you're filming. Very important to make sure that you aren't maxing out your levels. I leave that standard, leave that off. Marker display have on. Marker settings. Center is off, aspect ratio 2:35:1, safety zone off, guide frame off. If you're not too sure what these are, basically when you're filming, it displays the lines or the grids. It gives you safe zones if you need to film in a certain aspect ratio. That's where you'd set the settings so you could make sure you're filming everything in that aspect ratio. Video light mode, I don't even know what that does. Power link is what I have it set to, it works fine. Don't change it. Movie with shutter, I leave to off. Silent shooting off. E-front curtain on. I know there's a big deal about this with focusing for photography. Don't use photos that much, so I just have it set to on. Apparently on is the best thing to leave it to anyway. Release without lens enabled, release without card enabled. These aren't really settings that are going to help you get better videos, but I'm just kind of showing you what I have my camera set up to. Steady shot obviously on. Zoom, this is an important one. So I use clear image zoom. Clear image zoom gives you the ability to zoom in without losing quality if you're using like a prime lens. If you want to click one of my videos up here, that'll tell you all about using clear image zoom. If you didn't want that set, you could just leave it to optical zoom if you're using a lens that has a zoom. Display button you don't need to touch. Find a monitor, this is a big one. If you're in a sunny environment and you can't see the screen, sometimes it's not the greatest. This means if you put your eye up to the cup here, it's going to show you through the EVF opposed to on the screen. You then move your eye away and it allows you to see the screen again. I have this set to auto. If you just wanted to use the viewfinder, you'd have it set to viewfinder. If you just want to use the screen and not have it automatically go to the viewfinder, you'd use monitor. I like to use both, so I leave it to auto. Zebra settings. Zebra display is on. If you're not too sure what this is, it means if your video is overexposed, it shows you by flashing with zebras. And I leave it to 70. That's a good zone for me. Grid line off, exposure set guide off, live view display, can't do anything. Leave that to not displayed. Auto review, if you're taking a photo, it shows you it back for 2 seconds afterwards before it disappears. Custom keys. Now I have these set up. For video is what I'll show you. So control wheel I use for shutter speed, focus mode is custom bottom 1, custom bottom 2 is for crop mode. So if you're using a prime lens and you want to be able to zoom in, or even a zoom lens, and it's a full frame lens, you can swap to crop mode, 4K video still. If you're shooting in photos, you would go to 10 megapixels opposed to 20. Yeah, really useful mode, use that a ton. Custom button 3 is zoom, so clear image zoom, and custom button 4 just follows the photography mode. And then these ones here, I don't really use these much, so I kind of leave them as standard. I have my dial set up that way. If you wanted to reverse that, you could reverse it, I leave it to normal. Movie button always. What that means is if you hit the movie button here, it's going to record a video whatever mode you're in. I have mine set to always. I always want to record movies. Or films, whatever you want to call them. Lock operational parts off, audio signals off. That is a horrible one. It comes on as standard in the camera. Turn that off. Those beeps are annoying. That autofocus beep, so annoying. And yeah, that's all my video settings. A lot of those aren't going to help you get better video, but it's important for you to know how I use my camera, how I achieve the videos that I use. That's the settings I use on the camera. As I said at the beginning of the video, I use custom 1 and custom 2 for all my settings. If you want to be able to set custom 1 and custom 2, here's my best advice. The hard work and most of the settings are already assigned for you if you go to the video mode and then save to custom 1 and 2. Whereas if you were in manual mode, it's going to be designed around photography. So put it to video mode, then change your settings on custom 1 and 2. What I'm going to quickly show you how to do now is how to change your custom settings. So I'm in 1 right now, which is where I have 120, 100 megabit video, so for slow motion B-roll. If you wanted to change, let's say, this to 4K video instead, so 1 is now 4K video and 2 is something else, you could do that by doing this. Change that to 4K. Then you want to go to tab 1, go across to memory, and then you see 1 or 2 here. So if I click on 1, it's going to save that setting to 1. If I click on 2, it's going to save it to 2. So before, I had 1 set to 120 frames a second. So now what we're about to do is change it to 4K 24 frames a second. So if I click OK, you see how it says registered? Now if you see me change to 2, you see it's on 4K there. Change back to 1, it's on 4K. That's because I just changed it. If we want to change that back, so
I realize that I'm just talking about my custom 1 and 2 settings and only discussing the fact that I changed the video quality and the frame rate between 4K and 1080, 120 frames a second. You can change those custom 1 and 2 to absolutely anything you want. So if you want like ISO to be 500 on custom 1 and then 1000 on custom 2, or one white balance on one white balance on another, continuous autofocus on one and not on the other, you can do that. Absolutely anything you want, custom 1, custom 2, change those settings, assign them to 1 and 2, and it will remember them. They don't have to be just a little change like I use for video quality. Okay, that's it. Back to the video. Once more.
Go to menu, go to tab 2, change this to A7iii HD. We're already on 120, which is good. Go back to tab 1, go to memory, hit on 1, registered. So now I've put 120 frames a second back to custom 1. So if we go to custom 2 again, there you go, 4K video, 24 frames a second, back to custom 1. You can see there it's changed back to 120 frames a second. I just had to put a lens cap on the front there because you could just see this white wall and none of these settings. So I want to talk to you quickly about these as well. So auto white balance for the most part, if I'm shooting these kinds of videos outside, if the light's changing or if you're going from inside to outside, I would suggest setting that to the right color temperature for your room. Dynamic range I leave off. That will affect your shadows and your highlights. You can do that yourself in post. I would suggest leave that off. Creative style here, I use autumn leaves. Click on the video up here if you aren't aware of my creative style I love and I use all the time. Picture profile is off, pre-autofocus is off. This is my focusing mode, I leave it set to wide and I'm currently on manual focus. Now you can remove some of these features here by clicking the display button and then it'll add them back on. So if you just click it, it will cycle through all the different options you have. A really clean, kind of simple layout there. Add the audio markers, add a horizon level there, so if you're slightly crooked, it'll tell you. And then back to everything. That's pretty much it. That's how I have my camera set up. This may not be the best setup for you. This is what works for me. You kind of just have to go through, figure out yourself, and once you have it set up how you like it, keep it that way. You may disagree with how I have some of the settings. Each to their own. Everyone has it set up differently. This is what works for me. I like it like this, and this is what I'll continue to use until I have a problem or find something better. So there we go. That is my settings for the A7 III. I think the big thing to take away from this is if you're not using the custom 1 and 2 modes on the dial there, you should be. It's literally a game changer. It will literally change the way that you shoot your videos. To quickly swap from 4K to B-roll 120 frames a second is a big deal. It speeds things up when you're out about filming things. I know there are people out there that don't use that mode. When I first got Sony, it was like 2 or 3 months before I even figured out about that. So that is a big thing. You should be using that. If you're not using it, start using it today. So there we go, my settings on the camera. You may have found this video useful. You may have just been interested. Either way, like down below if you'd be so kind. Subscribe to my channel if you're not part of it already. And I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.